The clock on the grand mantel in the Vance Manor ticked with an almost malicious rhythm. Each second a hammer blow against Elias Vance's already frayed nerves. 30 days. 30 days to marry a woman he'd never seen chosen by a man he barely knew, all to secure an empire he never truly wanted. The irony was a bitter taste in his mouth. His father, Malcolm Vance Sr., had always dealt in steel and concrete in cold, hard facts. Yet his final suffocating decree was steeped in an ancient, almost mystical demand. An arranged marriage, a ritual from a bygone era, plucked from the dusty pages of a will that felt more like a curse. Elias had immediately summoned Mr. Henderson, the family's stoic, silver-haired lawyer, whose face rarely betrayed emotion, but even he seemed to wince as he confirmed the clause. Ironclad, Mr. Vance, your father's wishes are explicit. Unless you marry within the stipulated time frame, the entire Vance Industries fortune will be liquidated and donated to a series of obscure charitable trusts. Trusts, I might add, with no oversight and a suspiciously vague mission statement. Elias felt a cold dread settle in his stomach. His father, even in death, found a way to manipulate to control. He was a master puppeteer, and Elias, his only son, remained his most prized, albeit unwilling, marionette. His mother, Eleanor, a woman whose quiet strength had always been Elias's silent anchor, now seemed to shrink under the weight of this new burden. "Elias, my dear," she'd whispered, her voice barely audible above the hum of the air conditioning in the grand drawing room. "Your father, he always had a vision. And the Nadala family, they are partners old and respected. Their traditions are different, but their honor is unquestionable." Eleanor herself, a descendant of a prominent Southern black family, understood the complexities of legacy. But even she seemed wary of this particular arrangement. "Her name is Zola," she continued, her gaze distant, "from a very old family, rooted in the lands of—" Her voice trailed off, a hint of unease in her eyes. It was a partnership forged generations ago, a silent, powerful alliance that had always existed just beyond the Vance spotlight. The prenuptial meeting was a surreal affair. Elias had braced himself for a woman designed to fit Malcolm Sr.'s corporate mold. Sharp, perhaps unfeeling, but nothing could have prepared him for Zola Ndala. She entered the room with an almost ethereal grace, her tall, slender frame draped in a gown of deep sapphire. But her face was completely, utterly obscured by an intricately embroidered black veil. It was a traditional gutra, a type of veil, Elias would later learn, worn by certain women from a powerful traditional family of West African descent, renowned for their ancient wisdom and fierce independence. It wasn't sheer, it wasn't delicate, it was opaque, a solid, elegant wall between her and the world. Elias felt a surge of unadulterated fury. He, Elias Vance, the heir to a multi-billion-dollar empire, was being forced to marry a ghost. "Who is she?" he demanded of Mr. Henderson, his voice a low growl. "And why the shroud?" Mr. Henderson had simply cleared his throat. "It is their tradition, Mr. Vance, a mark of respect, of identity, and of a deep personal choice." Elias scoffed. A choice. It felt more like a grotesque joke, a final twisted act of defiance from his father. He imagined the whispers, the snickers, the knowing glances from the city's elite. He, Elias Vance, would be the laughingstock of Atlanta. And so the wedding day arrived, a spectacle of opulent absurdity. The grand ballroom of the Vance Manor, usually a beacon of vibrant life during the few social events Elias hosted, was now a cathedral of hushed judgment. The air was thick with the scent of lilies and thinly veiled contempt. The old money families, the Dubois and the Fitzwilliams, their faces a mixture of feigned sympathy and barely contained amusement, gathered in hushed groups. "Have you seen her?" Mrs. Dubois, a woman whose smile never quite reached her eyes, whispered loudly to a cluster of socialites, her gaze fixed on the veiled bride. They say she's disfigured. A monster, perhaps, hidden beneath that fabric." Laughter, soft but sharp as shards of glass, rippled through the room. Elias stood at the altar, outwardly composed, inwardly seething. His jaw was clenched so tight his teeth ached. He felt the weight of every gaze, every malicious whisper. He was a puppet, dancing on his father's strings, a spectacle for the cruel entertainment of the city's elite. And Zola, she stood beside him, a statue of serene indifference. He couldn't see her face, couldn't read her emotions. Was she ashamed, hurt? Or was she simply as cold, as calculating as his father had been? He allowed his prejudice to fester, convinced that only a woman with something to hide would appear this way. How often do we, in our haste to judge, allow the whispers of others or our own rigid perceptions to blind us to the truth? We paint our own narratives, often based on the shallowest of canvases, and condemn without truly seeing. Life at Vance Manor became a silent battleground. Elias buried himself in work, spending countless hours in his study, trying to outrun the phantom presence that now shared his home. He rarely saw Zola. She moved like a shadow, emerging only when necessary, her footsteps silent, her presence almost undetectable. He half expected her to be helpless, a mere ornament, a relic of an old tradition. He assumed she'd be a burden, another item on his father's long list of responsibilities. But then, subtle shifts began. Initially, Elias dismissed them. The meticulously organized ledgers that appeared on his desk each morning, perfectly balanced, correcting errors he hadn't even noticed. The unexpected aroma of traditional West African spices. Jollof rice kelewela, wafting from the kitchen, replacing the bland, familiar scents. He'd find his cluttered study a hurricane of documents transformed into an oasis of order, every paper precisely where it needed to be. He'd walk past a room and hear a faint lyrical hum, a tune unlike anything he'd ever heard, almost too brief to register. He tried to ignore them, to attribute them to the well-oiled machinery of the Vance staff, but a nagging suspicion, a flicker of curiosity began to stir within him. The first true crack in Elias's rigid facade came during a critical board meeting. Vance Industries was in a precarious position, grappling with a complex financial projection that threatened to undermine a crucial overseas investment. Elias, despite his rigorous training, found himself at an impasse, the numbers refusing to align. Zola, as per the will's absurd stipulations, sat silently in the corner of the room, a veiled enigma. The tension was palpable. Suddenly, a small, elegantly folded note appeared on his desk. Elias glanced at it, annoyed at the distraction. It was from Zola. He unfolded it, his eyes scanning the precise, elegant script. A single incisive calculation, a unique market insight was scrawled across the paper. He rechecked the numbers, his mind racing. It was brilliant. It was precise. It was the solution. He implemented her suggestion, and the room exhaled in a collective gasp of relief. The board members, previously dismissive of the veiled bride, exchanged stunned glances. Elias felt a jolt of something akin to awe mixed with profound bewilderment. How often do we limit our solutions by clinging to what's familiar, to the methods we've always known? Sometimes the most insightful answers, the most profound wisdom, comes from the quietest corners, from sources we least expect. We assume silence equals ignorance, or difference equals inadequacy. But true power often doesn't need to shout. This subtle, almost imperceptible guidance was not the forceful, demanding control his father had wielded. It was something entirely different, a quiet, strategic brilliance that spoke volumes without a single uttered word. He began to wonder, what other depths lay hidden beneath that veil? And what secrets did this woman forced into his life truly possess? The game, it seemed, had just begun, and Elias Vance, for the first time in a long time, felt a prickle of genuine, unsettling curiosity. Elias, still smarting from the unexpected strategic coup in the boardroom, found himself in an unfamiliar emotional landscape, curiosity, not the fleeting kind, but a deep, persistent hum in his mind. Who was this woman, this veiled enigma who could dissect complex financial models with a single precise note? He began to deliberately, subtly test her. He'd leave intricate financial reports riddled with deliberate minor errors splayed open on his study desk before heading to the gym. He'd accidentally mention a looming business dilemma during a strained breakfast in the grand dining hall. Each time, without fail, Zola would respond. A neat, precise correction scrawled on a sticky note tucked into a ledger. A quiet, almost imperceptible murmur of a brilliant solution as she passed his office door. Once during a tense conference call, Elias found himself wrestling with a seemingly insurmountable challenge, a failing subsidiary, Vance Agri Innovations, bleeding money in the heartland. Their traditional methods, once cutting edge, were now obsolete. He was about to cut their losses when a small, almost imperceptible cough from Zola, who was sitting quietly in a distant chair, made him pause. She leaned forward slightly, her veiled head tilted, and softly murmured, "Community-supported agriculture. Direct-to-consumer forgotten heirloom seeds." Elias, startled, had dismissed her words in the moment, but later researching those seemingly random phrases, he unearthed a burgeoning market, a niche his father's rigid vision had completely overlooked. Zola's seemingly simplistic suggestions, born from a deep understanding of local economies and sustainable practices, became the blueprint for a complete overhaul that not only saved Vance Agri Innovations, but turned it into a surprisingly profitable venture. Another time, Vance Industries found itself the target of a subtle hostile takeover attempt by a ruthless competitor, the Sterling Group. They were buying up small shares, spreading negative rumors, systematically eroding Vance's market confidence. Elias was caught flat-footed, ready to fight a desperate public battle. Zola, witnessing his frustration, approached him one evening holding a thick, worn book on West African proverbs. "My grandmother always said," she began, her voice soft but clear, "the hunter who waits silently for his prey often bags the biggest game. The loudest drums do not always lead the victory dance." And she then laid out a preemptive countermove, a series of calculated silent acquisitions of the Sterling Group's own smaller vulnerable subsidiaries, turning the tables before they even knew what hit them. Her approach was not about direct confrontation, but about understanding the psychology of the opponent, a chess match played on a global scale. This was not just business acumen. It was a profound intuitive understanding of human nature. We often assume that expertise comes from formal education or loud proclamations. But the sharpest insights, the most profound wisdom, often emerge from unexpected places, from those who observe quietly and think deeply. How many times have we underestimated someone because they didn't fit our preconceived notions of what competence should look like? The biggest test, however, came with the impending collapse of the Delcoré Minerals merger. This was Malcolm Sr. His pet project, a multi-billion-dollar deal meant to cement Vance Industries' global dominance in rare earth elements. But the Delcoré CEO, Dr. Anya Sterling, a formidable figure in her own right, had abruptly pulled back, citing cultural irreconcilable differences. Elias was frantic. His father's legacy, and by extension his own, was crumbling. Zola, witnessing his despair, stepped forward. "Dr. Sterling," she stated, her voice calm and steady, "is not driven by greed but by respect. She values authenticity, history, and a shared vision beyond mere profit. Her family, like mine, cherishes their heritage." Zola proposed a daring, unconventional strategy, a high-stakes, culturally immersive dinner meeting, not in a sterile boardroom, but at the Vance Manor, transformed into a tribute to Dr. Sterling's heritage. Elias watched mesmerized as Zola personally oversaw every detail. She instructed the staff to source authentic kente cloth for table runners and vibrant Bogalanfini mudcloth for draperies. She meticulously curated a menu that blended traditional West African cuisine, fufu with egusi soup, grilled tilapia with spiced plantains, with modern, elegant twists carefully chosen to appeal to Dr. Sterling's sophisticated palate. She selected specific kora and balafon music played by a renowned local musician, ensuring each note resonated with the intended cultural significance. Elias had merely signed off on the budget. Zola had breathed soul into the event. The dinner itself was a masterpiece of diplomacy. Elias observed Zola, still veiled, moving with breathtaking grace, a conductor leading an invisible orchestra. She didn't merely speak with Dr. Sterling, she connected. She engaged her in discussions about the philosophical underpinnings of ancient African art, the intricate narratives woven into storytelling traditions, the shared struggles and triumphs of their respective lineages. Zola's command of several African languages, her deep knowledge of history, and her ability to weave threads of cultural understanding into their business discussions utterly disarmed Dr. Sterling. The atmosphere shifted from tense negotiation to genuine connection, from calculated profit to shared purpose. Dr. Sterling, initially cold and reserved, found herself smiling, laughing, and ultimately shaking Zola's hand, a sign of profound respect. The Del Corre merger was saved not by brute force, but by finesse, by intelligence, by a deeply empathetic understanding of another's culture and values. Elias watched his jaw slack as the deal was sealed, not with a handshake between CEOs, but with a subtle, respectful nod between two powerful women. He felt a profound shift within him. He hadn't just found a wife, he'd found a strategic genius, a cultural bridge builder, and a force more powerful than any of his father's blunt instruments. One late evening, weeks after the Del Corre triumph, Elias found himself unable to sleep. He descended the grand staircase, drawn by a hauntingly beautiful melody, drifting from the seldom-used grand parlor. It was the Vance family's prized Steinway, a silent sentinel for years, now singing a complex, soulful piece that tugged at something deep within Elias. It wasn't the rigid classical compositions his father had forced him to learn. It was fluid, passionate, almost improvisational, echoing with both sorrow and a fierce, unyielding hope. He crept to the doorway, peering in. It was Zola. Her back was to him, her veiled head bowed slightly as her fingers danced across the keys. The music swelled, then softened, a powerful emotional journey playing out in the stillness of the night. He caught a glimpse of her shoulders, subtly swaying with the rhythm. He felt a raw, unfamiliar emotion bloom in his chest. A profound loneliness, perhaps, that found solace in her hidden melody. She stopped abruptly, sensing his presence. The sudden silence was almost deafening. She didn't turn, didn't acknowledge him, but the music lingered, an echo of a hidden talent, a glimpse into a soul he was only just beginning to perceive. It's a common mistake to believe that the most valuable parts of a person are what they choose to show the world. Often, the truest, most beautiful aspects of someone are reserved for their private moments, or for those who take the time to truly listen, to truly see beyond the obvious. Subtly, almost imperceptibly, Zola began to recurate the stiff, lifeless art collection that filled the Vance Manor. Malcolm Sr. had favored imposing classical European pieces, landscapes, portraits of stern-faced ancestors. Zola, without asking, began to replace some of them with vibrant contemporary African art from her own collection. Bold, colorful abstracts, intricate wooden sculptures that told ancient stories, pieces that pulsed with a life Elias had never felt within these walls. He found himself inexplicably drawn to them, spending minutes, then hours, contemplating their forms, their colors. They were alive, vibrant, filled with a spirit that the old collection lacked. They represented a world of depth and meaning that was slowly, patiently unfolding before him, piece by beautiful piece. The ice that had encased his heart for so long was beginning to crack. And the woman who was chipping away at it, the woman he had dismissed as an ugly burden, remained veiled, her true self hidden, yet her presence became undeniably, exquisitely clear. He was no longer just curious. He was utterly, irrevocably fascinated. The next public appearance, he knew, would be a true test of their evolving dynamic. The success of the Del Corre merger had sent ripples through the city's elite, but not all of them were ripples of admiration. For every envious glance, there was a sharpened whisper, a subtle snicker. The whispers followed Elias and Zola everywhere like a persistent shadow. But Elias, for the first time, found himself immune to the venom. His focus was entirely on Zola, on the growing fascination that bordered on something else. The charity gala was the inevitable crucible. It was the social event of the season, a glittering trap laid by the very people who thrived on gossip and judgment. Elias, now feeling a strange protectiveness toward Zola, insisted they attend. He wanted to show them all, to somehow legitimize the brilliance he was witnessing. But deep down, a part of him knew it was a foolish gamble. As they entered the grand ballroom of the Omni Atlanta Hotel, a hush fell over the crowd. Every eye turned to them, not in admiration, but in a predatory assessment. Elias, in his impeccably tailored suit, stood tall, but it was Zola, draped in an elegant deep emerald gown, her face still completely veiled, who commanded the attention. She moved with an innate regality, her silent grace a stark contrast to the buzzing socialites. Mrs. Dubois, the queen bee of the city's social scene, whose smile was as sharp as her diamond earrings, glided towards them. "Edward, darling," she cooed, her eyes, however, fixed on Zola. "And this must be your lovely wife, so mysterious." Her tone dripped with saccharine malice. "We were all so curious, dear. Such a unique choice for a Vance. One wonders what profound secret lies beneath that fashion statement. Perhaps a disfigurement, or simply a desperate attempt to hide a rather plain countenance." A titter of suppressed laughter rippled through her entourage. Elias felt a cold rage ignite in his chest. His father's cold training had taught him to suppress emotion to remain detached. But seeing Zola so dignified, so composed, enduring such casual cruelty, something snapped. He stepped forward, his voice a low, dangerous rumble that cut through the polite chatter. "Mrs. Dubois," he said, his eyes like chips of ice. "My wife's fashion statement is a testament to her heritage and her inner strength. A strength, I might add, that far surpasses the superficiality I often encounter in certain circles." He paused, letting his gaze sweep pointedly across her clique. "Perhaps you might try looking beyond the surface, and you might be surprised by the true brilliance that lies beneath." Zola beside him remained utterly still. She didn't flinch, didn't react, didn't even stiffen. Her composure was absolute, a silent, powerful rebuke to their malice. Her stillness in the face of such open hostility was far more impactful than any retort. It was Elias's raw, unexpected fury, his fierce public defense, that truly shocked the room. He, the controlled, emotionless Elias Vance, had chosen to fight for her. In that moment, he realized he wasn't just defending his wife. He was defending something fundamentally good and honorable against a world he was now starting to see as truly ugly. How often do we find our own strength, our own voice when we stand up for someone else? Especially someone vulnerable. Sometimes the external pressure forces us to confront our own values and choose which side of humanity we truly belong to. The next few weeks at Vance Industries became a whirlwind of new challenges. The triumph of the Del Corre merger had seemingly quieted external threats. But as the old saying goes, when things are too good to be true, they usually are. A series of seemingly random errors began to plague the company. Critical project files went missing from secure servers. Confidential client data was leaked to minor obscure media outlets. Key investor meetings were mysteriously double-booked or cancelled at the last minute. Elias and Zola, now an undeniable force, quickly realized this wasn't mere incompetence. It was a targeted campaign of internal sabotage. Elias's first instinct was to suspect his father's old guard, the long-serving executives who might resent a new, less predictable leadership. But Zola, ever the quiet observer, had a different intuition. While Elias focused on data logs and security camera footage, Zola watched the people. She noticed the subtle shifts in body language, the forced smiles, the unusual lunchtime meetings. She saw the simmering resentment in the eyes of mid-level executives who felt their decades of loyalty had been overlooked in Malcolm Sr.'s ruthless ascent. Through a series of quiet, almost imperceptible inquiries, she began to piece together the puzzle. She noted how Mr. Thorne, a seemingly innocuous manager in the IT department who always prided himself on his discretion, suddenly had new expensive watches and an unusual air of bravado. She then subtly set a trap. She created a decoy document, a false sensitive internal memo about a proposed merger, and intentionally made it accessible to only a small specific group of individuals, including Thorne. Within hours, snippets of the false information began to appear on obscure industry forums. Armed with Zola's irrefutable evidence, Elias confronted Mr. Thorne in his office. Thorne initially blustered, then denied, but when Elias laid out the meticulously gathered evidence, the man crumbled. And that's when the true shockwave hit. Thorn wasn't merely a disgruntled employee. He was actively collaborating with the Onyx Group, a rising rival company that had been quietly trying to destabilize Vance Industries for years, promising Thorn a senior position after the inevitable collapse. And the twist, Thorn admitted under duress that he had been specifically tasked with spreading the rumors about Zola's ugliness and the scandalous nature of their marriage. It was a calculated distraction meant to discredit Elias and destabilize the company from within, using the veil as a weapon of social manipulation. Just as Thorn finished his confession, a soft knock came from the door. It was Bethany Elias's long-suffering personal assistant, a quiet, unassuming woman who had been with Vance Industries for 20 years. She stepped forward, her hands trembling slightly, holding a flash drive. "Mr. Vance," she whispered, I saw Mr. Thorn. He was meeting with Mr. Hayes from Onyx Group several times, and I found this on his old computer." The drive contained encrypted emails, direct communications between Thorn and Onyx Group detailing their entire scheme. Bethany, often overlooked, had been quietly observing Thorn's suspicious activities for weeks, collecting the crucial corroborating evidence that sealed his fate. She had been a silent, loyal protector all along, a testament to the fact that even in the most cutthroat environments, integrity and quiet observation can be the most powerful weapons. The internal threat was contained, the network of disgruntled employees dismantled. Elias and Zola emerged from the storm, stronger, their bond undeniably forged in the fires of adversity. He had seen her intellect, her grace, her unwavering composure. Now he had witnessed her sharp investigative prowess and her profound loyalty. The veil remained a silent mystery, but for Elias, it no longer represented a hidden flaw. It was a symbol of quiet strength, a challenge to his own superficiality. But the biggest question still hung in the air, a silent plea on his lips, what truly lay beneath. The time for answers was fast approaching. With the internal sabotage quelled and the external threats neutralized, a strange calm settled over Vance Manor. Elias and Zola, once strangers bound by a chilling will, now stood shoulder to shoulder, a formidable team. The walls between them, built of Elias's prejudice and Zola's mystery, had not just crumbled, they had dissolved. Elias found himself consumed by a desperate, almost aching need to understand her, to see the face behind the brilliance, to know the heart that beat beneath the veil. His fascination had matured into a profound, undeniable affection. One quiet evening, after a long day of strategizing and planning for Vance Industries' future, they found themselves on the balcony overlooking the shimmering tapestry of Atlanta. The city lights, usually a cold, distant glow, now seemed to pulse with a warmth Elias hadn't noticed before. The night air was crisp, carrying the faint scent of magnolias. Elias took a deep breath, the moment pregnant with unspoken questions. He turned to Zola, his voice gentle, almost a whisper, completely devoid of the judgment that had once tainted his words. "Zola," he began, his heart pounding a frantic rhythm against his ribs. I need to ask you something. If you're willing to share. Why the veil?" A long, poignant silence stretched between them, punctuated only by the distant hum of the city. Elias watched her, his gaze unwavering, willing her to trust him. He saw a subtle tremor in her hands, a slight stiffening of her shoulders. The first outward sign of vulnerability he'd ever witnessed from her. After what felt like an eternity, Zola slowly turned her head tilted slightly, her veiled gaze fixed on the twinkling lights below. She reached into the pocket of her elegant tunic and withdrew a small, intricately carved wooden box, worn smooth with age. It was dark, rich wood, adorned with symbols Elias didn't recognize, but he felt an ancient energy emanating from it, a keepsake. This veil. Zola began, her voice, soft, melodic, yet resonating with a quiet power, is more than just a piece of fabric, Elias. It is a legacy. My family, the Ndala, are descendants of a very old lineage, one of the original founding families of the region from which we hail in West Africa. For generations, the women of my family have chosen to wear this veil, the gutra. It is not a symbol of oppression or shame, as many outsiders wrongly assume. On the contrary, her voice grew firmer. It is a sacred tradition, a choice. It signifies wisdom, spiritual strength, and the belief that true beauty radiates from within, from the character, the mind, the spirit, not from the fleeting superficiality of physical appearance. It is a deliberate rejection of a world that judges by the shallowest of canvases. We choose to be seen for our essence, not our form. Elias listened, mesmerized, his mind reeling. He had always dismissed tradition as archaic, a hindrance to progress, a relic of a less enlightened time. Yet Zola's explanation, delivered with such conviction and grace, revealed a profound depth, a defiant stance against the very superficiality that had defined his own upbringing. His father had taught him to judge based on numbers, on profit margins, on outward success. Zola's family had taught her to value the unseen, the intangible, the profound. We often mistake tradition for backwardness, but sometimes ancient practices hold a wisdom that modern society, in its rush for novelty, has forgotten. What might seem restrictive to one culture can be a source of profound strength, identity, and protection for another. But then, Zola took a deeper breath, her posture subtly shifting, and Elias knew there was more. This wasn't just about culture. This was personal. There is another reason, Elias. She continued, her voice now a little softer, a raw edge of vulnerability seeping through. A more personal one. She paused, her fingers tracing the intricate carvings on the wooden box. When I was a young girl, perhaps 8 years old, there was an incident. A devastating fire in the market in my village. It was during a period of civil unrest, chaos, and fear. My younger sister Amara was trapped. I ran in. I managed to pull her out. Her voice hitched slightly. But in doing so, she finally turned to face him, her veiled head slightly bowed. She slowly, deliberately reached up to the veil. Elias felt his breath catch in his throat, his heart hammering in his chest. This was it, the moment of truth. His mind raced, imagining everything severe, burns, a grotesque disfigurement, a scar that confirmed every cruel whisper. He braced himself, not knowing what to expect, but knowing with a certainty that transcended sight that it didn't matter. He loved her. He loved her mind, her spirit, her strength. With a gentle, almost reverent motion, Zola slowly, carefully lifted the veil. The flickering city lights caught the contours of her face, and Elias, for the first time, saw her. He saw the scars, not a single monstrous disfigurement, but a delicate, intricate network of silvery thin scars across her left cheek, tracing a path from her temple down towards her jawline, some fine as spider webs, others a little thicker, a silent testament to searing heat. They pulled slightly at the corner of her left eye, giving her a unique, almost ethereal look. But as Elias looked, his eyes didn't linger on the scars themselves. He saw the proud slope of her nose, the elegant curve of her lips, the luminous depth of her rich, dark eyes, now glistening with unshed tears. She was not ugly. She was breathtakingly beautiful. A beauty that was both classic and profoundly unique, made even more striking by the story etched onto her skin. "They are marks of courage," she whispered, her voice barely audible. "My family. They chose to honor my act of saving Amara by embracing the tradition of the veil even more strongly. It was not to hide me from the world, but to protect me from the judgment of a superficial world, and to emphasize that my true value, my true beauty, lay not in the flawless surface, but in the strength that had saved a life." Elias was speechless. Tears, hot and unexpected, welled in his own eyes. Not tears of pity, but of profound respect, of shame for his initial prejudice, and an overwhelming, encompassing love that surged through him, fierce and undeniable. He reached out his hand, trembling slightly, and gently, reverently traced the line of her cheek, his thumb brushing against the cool, smooth skin where the scars lay. He saw not a flaw, but a testament to her strength, her bravery, her sacrifice. The ugly woman he had married, the one he had dismissed as a grotesque burden, was revealed to be a magnificent, courageous soul, a woman of unparalleled beauty, both inside and out. His own carefully constructed world of shallow judgments and calculated expectations shattered into a million pieces around him, replaced by a profound, humbling truth. True beauty is not the absence of flaws, but the courage to carry your story to bear your scars and the strength to shine from within, transforming perceived imperfections into badges of honor. In that stillness on that balcony overlooking the city, Elias understood. He hadn't just married a woman. He had found his soulmate, his partner, his mirror. And as he held her close, feeling the truth of her presence, he knew his life had just begun. The unveiling was complete, not just of her face, but of his own heart. The next step was to share this truth with the world not as a secret, but as a triumph. The morning after Zola unveiled her truth, the Vance Manor seemed to hum with a different kind of energy. The oppressive silence that had once defined it was replaced by a vibrant, almost tangible sense of purpose. Elias awoke with a clarity he'd never known. The love he felt for Zola wasn't just passion. It was a profound respect, a recognition of her incredible strength and wisdom. He knew with absolute certainty that his life and the future of Vance Industries had to be forged anew, not on the cold, calculating principles of his father, but on the values Zola embodied: authenticity, empathy, and a vision that extended beyond mere profit. Elias called an emergency board meeting. The air in the mahogany-paneled boardroom was tense, thick with speculation. The older board members, veterans of Malcolm Sr.'s regime, shifted uncomfortably. They had heard the whispers from the charity gala, seen the unusual efficiency of the Del Corre merger, and sensed a fundamental shift in Elias Vance. But nothing could have prepared them for what was about to unfold. Elias stood at the head of the long table, his gaze sweeping over the assembled executives. He didn't begin with numbers or quarterly reports. Instead, he spoke of legacy. For too long, he began, his voice resonating with a newfound authority. Vance Industries has been defined by a singular vision, that of my father, Malcolm Vance Sr., a vision of ruthless efficiency of profit above all else. And while his ambition built this empire, it also cast a long shadow. He paused, his eyes meeting Zola's, who sat beside him, serene and composed. My father's will forced me into a marriage, but what began as an obligation has become the greatest blessing of my life. My wife Zola has shown me that true leadership is not about control, but about understanding. Not about brute force, but about insight. And not about what we acquire, but about what we build and how we build it. He then turned to Zola, a genuine loving smile gracing his lips. It is with immense pride, he continued, his voice ringing with conviction, that I introduce Zola not just as my wife and a brilliant advisor, but as the driving force behind the new Vance Industries. Zola, for the first time in a public setting, did not wear her veil. The subtle, intricate scars on her cheek were visible, a quiet testament to her courage. The room, which had been buzzing with anticipation, fell silent. Elias watched as the initial shock on the faces of the board members morphed into a mixture of awe and dawning comprehension. The whispers about her ugliness were instantly, definitively silenced. What they saw was not a disfigurement, but a symbol of strength, a living story of survival and triumph. Zola stood, her posture radiating quiet confidence. She didn't seek pity or even explicit recognition for her scars. She simply owned her truth. I am honored. She began, her voice clear and strong, not because of any title, but because of what we can build together. My role here as part of this leadership is not just to advise, but to challenge, to question, to protect what truly matters: our values. Let us make ethical practice, community investment, and genuine partnership our legacy. Let us build an empire that lifts others up, not just ourselves. Her words, delivered with such conviction and quiet power, were met with a beat of stunned silence. Then, a wave of genuine, sustained applause that filled the room. This wasn't polite clapping. It was an acknowledgement of a profound truth, a shift in the very fabric of Vance Industries. And so Elias and Zola embarked on a new era for Vance Industries. Their partnership was seamless, a blend of Elias's sharpened business acumen and Zola's profound wisdom and ethical compass. They championed initiatives that truly reflected their shared values. They launched the Ndala Vance Global Empowerment Fund, channeling significant portions of Vance Industries' profits into developing sustainable infrastructure and educational programs in underserved communities, particularly in West Africa. They built schools in Zola's home country, funded scholarships for underprivileged youth, and invested in local agricultural projects that promoted self-sufficiency, embodying the very principles of community-supported agriculture Zola had once subtly whispered. The Vance Manor, once a cold, formidable fortress, transformed under Zola's influence. The sterile rooms filled with vibrant African art, the haunting melodies of the kora and balafon, often drifted from the parlor, and the scent of exotic spices filled the air. It became a home, a sanctuary of shared purpose and growing affection. Elias and Zola, once strangers forced together, found a profound, unwavering love. They often stood on the balcony overlooking the glittering cityscape, their hands clasped. "I never imagined this is where we'd end up," Elias would often say, his voice filled with wonder. "Neither did I," Zola would reply, her eyes reflecting the night sky. "But I think we've done well." "Better than I could have hoped." He would smile, pulling her close. Their story became a quiet legend, not just within Vance Industries, but throughout the city. The Vance name, once synonymous with ruthless ambition, transformed into a beacon of compassionate leadership and genuine progress. They were a powerful, undeniable force, not because of their wealth, but because of their shared values, their integrity, and their profound love. And there, in the stillness of a shared life, in the heart of a home that had once felt like a prison, two people stood side by side. No longer strangers bound by obligation, no longer defined by the world's superficial judgments, but partners bound by choice, respect, and a love that had grown not from what they had initially seen, but from what they had chosen to truly understand. The greatest legacies are not just about the empires we build, but the hearts we touch, the values we uphold, and the change we inspire. Sometimes the most profound transformations come when we allow ourselves to be truly seen, and when we choose to see others not for what they appear to be, but for who they truly are. And there they stood, Elias and Zola, hand in hand, on the balcony of Vance Manor. The city lights of Atlanta sparkled below, no longer a cold, distant glow, but a vibrant tapestry of possibility. The empire, once a gilded cage, now felt like a sprawling canvas for their shared dreams. What had begun as a chilling obligation, a father's final manipulative decree to marry an ugly woman, had transformed into a profound, undeniable love story. Elias had been a man shaped by control, by cold calculations, by the superficial judgments of a world that valued appearance and power above all else. He had almost condemned Zola, based solely on a veil and the cruel whispers of society. But Zola, with her quiet strength, her hidden brilliance, and the heartbreaking truth of her scars, had shattered his preconceptions. She had shown him that the deepest beauty lies not in the absence of flaws, but in the courage to carry one's story, to bear one's past, and to shine from within, even when the world tries to dim your light. Her veil, once a symbol of mystery and perceived ugliness, had become a profound lesson. It was a testament to her heritage, a defiant rejection of superficiality, and ultimately a badge of honor representing a strength forged in the crucible of trauma. When she chose to unveil her truth, it wasn't a confession of shame, but an act of powerful, self-possessed vulnerability that transformed not just the room, but the very definition of beauty for all who witnessed it. This story of Elias and Zola is a powerful reminder for all of us. To anyone who has ever felt unseen, judged, or forced into a path not of your own choosing, know that your true strength lies within. Your story, your scars, your background, the very things that others might try to use against you, these are not weaknesses. They are sources of profound power, resilience, and unique wisdom. Don't let the whispers of the world define your worth. Don't let superficiality dictate your narrative. Look deeper. Beyond the veil of first impressions, beyond the deceptive allure of external validation, beyond your own preconceived notions and the judgments you might silently carry. What truths are waiting to be unveiled in your own life? What untold strengths lie within you waiting to be discovered? And what extraordinary beauty might you find when you truly open your heart and choose to see others, not for what they appear to be, but for who they truly are? Zola and Elias, through their journey, remind us that the most valuable connections are forged in respect, empathy, and the courage to look past the surface. Their legacy isn't just about business. It's about building a better world. One connection, one understanding, one unveiled truth at a time. They chose to build a legacy not of mere wealth, but of meaning, integrity, and profound love. If this story resonated with you, if it made you think, feel, or look at the world a little differently, please hit that like button. Subscribe to our channel for more powerful stories that challenge perceptions and inspire strength, and share your thoughts in the comments below. We read every single one. Until next time, stay strong, stay true, and keep unveiling your own powerful story to the world.